Hello and welcome back to the Kids Story Room and to episode 6 of The Tale of Shaggles and Petrookio. Let's see what happens when our friends get down to the sea. Here we go. Shaggles was excited that they might be able to save Julep. He walked alongside the creek as Palala, Gloogly and Flugia slowly swam Julep downstream. Petrookio, who had stuck his head out of the mud in all the carry-on, was scuttling along behind, muttering to himself,
"I hate the sea, it's too salty, but where my friends go, so goes me. I'll come along, singing my song. I just hope it doesn't take very long to find a fix for the fish that's sick and to make him feel heaps better real quick. 'Cause I like these fish, how they splash and they splish, and I want them to be happy, and that's my wish."
The sea was about 3 kilometres away from where the fish lived in the river. Palala, Flugia and Gloogly were swimming and pushing Julep as fast as their little fins would flap. Shaggles struggled to keep up with them when he was in the water, so he would catch up by jumping out and doing land sprints. Petrookio was taking the easy option and hanging on to Shaggles' tail, but Shaggles was so busy trying to keep up with the fish he didn't even notice. Shaggles occasionally thought he could hear his name being called from far away, but the voice grew more and more distant the further down the river they went. "It might be my master calling," thought Shaggles. "He must be wondering where I am because I didn't go home last night." Then the thought left his mind, and his attention went back to poor Julep and getting him safely to the sea. They had been on the move for about 20 minutes when Shaggles put his head up and took a great sniff of the air. "We're nearly there," Shaggles called out. "I can smell the salt." "Good, good, 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 good," bob-lopped the fish and began to swim faster.
"Yuck,"
squeaked Petrookio and let go of Shaggles' tail.
"I'm going to crawl from here. First bit of salt I get in my nippers, and I'm gone,"
he muttered to himself. As they got closer to the mouth of the river, the water was getting muddier and muddier. Isn't it strange? I think it is. I remember always being clear water here. Yes, clear water. Yes, it was," bob-lopped Gloogly. But before he had finished bob-blopping, he suddenly swam into something hard and was knocked out. Flugia and Palala, who were right behind him, had no time to slow down, and they too swam into what seemed to be the bank of the creek and were knocked unconscious too. Julep was so sick he looked as though he was unconscious, and so now the 4 fish lay floating on top of the water, not one of them awake. Shaggles, who had been running in the river a little way behind them, barked in surprise to suddenly find his friends all floating on the surface. "What's happened?" asked Shaggles, to no one in particular. Petrookio, who had been crawling along behind quite happily because he hadn't found the water too sea salty, heard him.
"Look up!"
"What?" "Oh, it's you, Petrookio. I didn't think you were coming because you don't like salt water," said Shaggles.
"I don't."
"Well, how can you come down this far then?"
"It's not salty,"
stated Petrookio. "Of course it's salty," retorted Shaggles. Then, tasting the water, he said, "You're right. It's not salty."
"Look up,"
repeated Petrookio. Shaggles pulled his head out of the creek, shook the water out of his eyes, and looked up. A blast of salty sea breeze blew straight into his face, and he sneezed. They'd definitely reached the sea. He was staring straight out into a big white foamy splash of rolling surf. So what had gone wrong? Why had the fish suddenly hit the bank? Shaggles slowly shifted his gaze from the sea down to the ground. Between his wet paws in the creek and the whispering sea was a wide bar of white sand. "The beach," thought Shaggles excitedly. He loved the beach. "The beach!" he howled in sudden realization. What was the beach doing between the river and the sea? Finally, it dawned on him. The fish had swum headfirst into a sandbank. The river had stopped flowing out to the sea. His master must have taken so much water out that the river couldn't make the distance anymore. That was why it had been getting muddy, and why it wasn't too salty for Petrookio.
See now?
Said Petrookio, who had been watching Shaggles closely. Yes, Petrookio, this is terrible. What can we do?
Only one thing to do,
squeaked Petrookio. Which is? Asked Shaggles.
Get digging.
Of course. Where would I be without you, Petrookio? You're the best friend a dog could have. Shaggles frantically began to dig a channel from the edge of the creek backwards toward the sea. Petrookio was chuffed to have been called Shaggles' best friend, and he thought to himself, "Stuff the salt!" and scuttled to the edge of the river to help Shaggles dig. His claws made good scoops, and together they were making progress. The 4 fish were still floating, lifeless, at the edge of the creek. As Shaggles and Petrookio's little channel filled up with water, Petrookio reached out and guided the fish into it with his claws, so that when they finally dug enough sand out, the fish would get to the sea first. As they were digging in concentrated silence, Shaggles could hear his name being called again. He recognised the voice now. It was his master, searching for him. But Shaggles didn't have time to stop and look up. He just kept on digging. "Shaggles! Shaggles!" called the voice, louder and louder, until the man finally arrived at the edge of the dunes and spotted Shaggles digging by the creek. "There you are, Shaggles. I've been looking everywhere for you since last night. I thought you were lost. Come on, boy. Let's go home. Come, Shaggles," he called again, expecting Shaggles to run to his side as he normally would. "What are you doing, Shaggles?" the man asked, walking up to his dog. He realised something must be wrong for Shaggles not to listen to him, so he stood beside him and took a close look at what Shaggles was doing. What he saw was his dog and, to his great surprise, a yabby digging a track in the sand. Into the track was flowing water from the creek, and in the water floated 4 seemingly dead fish. The track they were digging was heading toward the sea. They were trying to get the river to flow out to the sea. "Well, I never," muttered the man. "What's been happening here? This river flowed out to the sea last week when I came down, and now it's not flowing, and these fish are dead, and Shaggles and a yabby are trying to dig the creek out. How strange."
"They're not dead,"
squeaked Petrookio. "He can't understand you, Petrookio," said Shaggles. "Humans don't speak animal languages."
"Ah,"
said Petrookio.
"Well, I'll show him they're not dead."
And he slid into the water where the fish were floating and gave all 4 of them a sharp nip on the nose. One by one, they opened their eyes and began flapping their fins. Even Julep gave a faint flutter. The man raised his eyebrows in surprise. "That's odd. I thought they were dead. That little yabby seems to be trying to tell me something." He squatted down beside the fish to have a closer look. The fish all turned one woeful eye up to look at him before restlessly flapping their fins and trying to push their way through the channel. "What's going on? Who's that monster? Where am I? How's Julep? Where's the sea? Where's Shaggles? Petrookio? That hurt. Where is everything?" the fish bob blopped. "We're nearly there," Shaggles called to them. "We just have to dig a little further. The river stopped flowing to the sea because too much water went up that pipe. Hold on." And Shaggles started to dig faster than ever. All the man heard was Shaggles barking at the fish, and now he was digging faster. "I get it!" shouted the man. "The fish are sick. They need to get to the sea. The river has to flow out to the sea." The man knelt down next to Shaggles and started digging with him. Shaggles was so happy that his master had recognised the urgency that he could have licked him. But there wasn't time. And that's the end of episode 6. I was thinking we would have 8 episodes, but I think we'll put the rest of the story all into episode 7, so it might be a little longer, but you'll get the rest of the story all in one. See you then. Bye.